Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Democrats begin laying out their case, claiming Trump's responsible for the Capitol violence, tracing Trump's comments back to election night. 14 states urging Biden to reverse course on the Keystone pipeline. We look at what's at stake and if they're prepared to take legal action. Border Patrol agents are making more arrests for illegal entries. Over 50 Republicans sent a letter to Biden warning him of what they called a rising migration crisis. The UK virus variant is spreading. President Biden's virus task force expects this strain to dominate others in the United States. Chicago teachers will finally be back in school after a bitter battle between the union and Chicago's public schools. Children can expect to go back in limited capacity soon. Democrats begin their uphill battle to convince two-thirds of the Senate that Trump's responsible for the January 6th Capitol Hill violence. Their evidence includes Trump's comments as far back as 2020's election night. NTD's Melina Wisecup brings us more on the Democrats' case.
So what we've seen from the Democrats' opening argument today is that they're arguing that the Capitol breach would not have happened without Trump. Their case largely focuses on Trump's tweets promoting the Stop the Steal rallies and his claims of election fraud.
He built this mob over many months with repeated messaging until they believed that they had been robbed of their vote and they would do anything to stop the certification.
Alleging Trump's words were actually carefully chosen to embolden people to break into the Capitol.
In the weeks prior to, during, and after the election, he used the same words over and over and over again.
They also cite as evidence Trump's promotion of the January 6th march. They even revisited comments made by Trump on November 3rd, election night. Attorney Mark Meckler tells us that pulling up comments from the past doesn't provide a solid argument, but instead quite the opposite.
So there's no direct connection, and the further away in time you go from the actual language to the violence, in other words, trying to use pre-existing language, maybe said weeks or even at this point months ago, led to violence on January 6th, it just doesn't meet any legal standard of incitement.
The Democrats claimed that Trump saying he won the election is what they call proof that Trump was desperate to use violence to overturn the results.
President Donald J. Trump ran out of non-violent options to maintain power.
The impeachment managers also aim to criminalize Trump's phone call with Georgia's Secretary of State, when Trump said that if Georgia conducts a signature audit in Fulton County, they'd find thousands of forged signatures and invalid ballots. The Democrats framed this conversation as Trump threatening the Secretary of State to manufacture those ballots to make up for his lost margin. Today was the beginning of a 16-hour presentation that the Democrats have prepared. And in the coming days, we'll also hear from Trump's attorneys as they also lay out their defense against these arguments. So that's all for now with this ongoing impeachment trial. Back to you, Steph.
Thanks, Melina. Historian Victor Davis Hanson describes the impeachment as performance art, and he expressed concern that wokeism is stifling America's free expression of ideas, something he says allowed the U.S. to surpass the communist and fascist worlds. NTD's Kevin Hogan tells us more.
Trump may be on his way to a new record, the president with the most acquittals in impeachment trials. Historian Victor Davis Hanson says it's easy to accuse or impeach a president, but it's much harder to convict one. And he says since we know in advance Trump won't be convicted, it's just political theater.
Not going to do it. We didn't do it in January of 2020, and we're not going to do it in February of 2021, and that's known in advance. So that tells you that this is performance art. It's not a serious attempt to either remove Donald Trump during his tenure or to ban him from office in his retirement. It's like a public shaming, like the Communist Party used to make people wear dunce caps. That's what it's intended for.
Speaking on American thought leaders, Hanson addressed the standard used to determine if Trump incited violence at the Capitol and compared that to Senator Schumer's speech at the Supreme Court last March.
So we're applying a standard to Donald Trump that if he says fight on or go over to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically, I don't think he should have said that, but he said, then that is one thing. But if you go to the Supreme Court while it's in session and you address two justices by name, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and you say to them, you won't know what hit you, and you're going to reap the whirlwind, that's okay, because Chuck Schumer, that's just good old Chuck. He doesn't really mean it.
Schumer addressed the two justices and said they released the whirlwind and they won't know what hit them if they go forward with their decision. Senator Rand Paul asked on Sunday, perhaps we should impeach Schumer. But enough about impeachment. Let's talk about wokeism. Hansen questions the resources spent on wokeness in K-12 schools and universities, and even our Super Bowl commercials have ideological intent meant to protect certain races.
And so what we're doing with these workshops, these indoctrinations, these qualifiers, these paranoid deterrents that we're using is that we're slowing down everything. And this generation is going to be looked back in retrospect as a failed generation that contributed nothing because it was burdened with this ideological bridle.
Hansen says wokeism has infiltrated entertainment, professional sports, late-night comedy, publishing, and media, which he says makes it more difficult for conservatives to have a say. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
President Biden is placing sanctions on those involved in the military takeover in Burma, also known as Myanmar, and he's calling for the immediate release of democratic political leaders and activists.
The military must relinquish power it seized and demonstrate respect for the will of the people of Burma, as expressed in their November 8th election. So today, I'm announcing a series of actions that we're taking to begin imposing consequences on the leaders of the coup.
Biden says his administration is freezing U.S. assets that benefit the Burmese government while maintaining support for the people of Burma. He says they're also going to impose strong export controls. On February the 1st, Burma's military ousted elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, among others. This was after top officials alleged election fraud took place. President Biden's calling on other countries to take action against Burma's military leaders, too. And the owner of an NBA team is coming under fire. This after news broke he directed the team to stop playing the national anthem before home games. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
The NBA's Dallas Mavericks is breaking a tradition upheld by almost every major sports team in America. The team is no longer playing the national anthem before home games. This at the direction of Mavericks owner Mark Cuban. Cuban declined to explain the reasoning behind the decision, but a clue may be found in his comments. Last year, Cuban expressed support for NBA players kneeling during the national anthem on ESPN.
If they were taking a knee and they were being respectful, I'd be proud of them. Hopefully, I'd join them.
Last year, the NBA saw a steep decline in revenue and viewership after players began kneeling for the anthem and engaging in left-wing political movements. The players were kneeling to show support for the Black Lives Matter movement, an act of protest critics say is disrespectful to the country and those who've died defending it. And now Cuban's decision is meeting with similar backlash. House candidate Robbie Starbuck and a number of others are comparing Cuban's attitude towards the U.S. to his attitude towards China, where the NBA does big business. Starbuck wrote in a tweet that it seems Cuban is okay doing business with China despite their concentration camps and torture, yet is not okay with the national anthem of the country that made him a billionaire. The NBA has come under fire for turning a blind eye to the Chinese Communist Party's human rights abuses and the ethnic cleansing of Uyghurs, as well as censoring players who speak out about it, whilst being vocal about racial justice at home. In October 2020, journalist Megyn Kelly asked Cuban on her podcast why the NBA would take $500 million from a country that's carrying out ethnic cleansing. Cuban's response,
because they are a customer. They are a customer of ours, and guess what, Megyn? I'm okay with doing business with China.
He said he's instead trying to help provide asylum for those fleeing the regime to the U.S. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And this just in, NBA Chief Communications Officer Mike Bass has responded to Cuban's decision. He released a statement saying all NBA teams will play the national anthem in keeping with long-standing league policy. This as NBA teams begin welcoming fans back into their arenas. And over 50 House Republicans are calling on Biden to secure the border. Patrol agents report a significant increase in illegal entry attempts and arrests. at numbers they haven't seen since the 2019 immigration crisis. NTD's Melina Weiskup gives us more details about the situation at the southern border.
In a letter, over 50 House Republicans urging the president to not let his ideology blind him from the importance of border security. They're warning Biden of the rise in illegal migration. Jen Psaki discourages migrants from coming to the border right now.
Now is not the time to come, and the vast majority of people will be turned away. Asylum processes at the border will not occur immediately, will take time to implement.
But an influx has already started. A border agent tells us they've already made over 30,000 arrests since October.
And to give you an idea of what that means, over this time last year, that is up almost 150%. Across the entire southwest border, we're currently apprehending anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500 people every 24 hours.
Chief Landrum also says they've seen a 337% increase in people found in stash houses. The lawmakers claim that Biden's recent executive orders on immigration have communicated that the U.S. border is open.
We thought Joe Biden was giving this opportunity for people to migrate and help their families get ahead, and that's what we were doing. Because in our countries, the hurricanes, COVID, Hurricane Eta, Hurricane Iota affected us greatly in Honduras.
Many migrants have innocent motives for coming to the U.S., like the hope for a better future. Chief Landrum urges them to enter at the legal ports because illegal entry attempts have become increasingly more dangerous.
We are seeing an increase in assaults on federal agents. So people are becoming more resistant. They're not just willingly complying with agents' direction whenever they're actually in the field.
And a significant 233% increase in weapon seizures. The good news, this rise in weaponry and federal assaults rarely makes its way into the Loretto community, which is mainly Hispanic and has seen a 55% decrease in crime since last year.
This year, we have a similar pattern of a reduction in crime, and so we continue to have a very good crime rate. But that's thanks in large part to our officers who are out on patrol, our investigators who are following up these cases, and our collaborations with other law enforcement agencies.
The officer says the majority of transnational gangs like MS-13 usually don't stay in their community, but pass through to other parts of the U.S. GOP lawmakers claim Biden's immigration policy alone encourages violent cartels and puts other migrants in danger.
But when somebody puts themselves into the situation of being smuggled from their home city all the way through to their final destination city, when they do that, along the way, the possibility of that transitioning from just human smuggling to human trafficking increases.
That's why the GOP lawmakers are calling on Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security to give immediate immigration-related briefings to all House members. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Canceling the Keystone pipeline is one of President Biden's most high-profile decisions so far. Thousands of jobs were lost the moment he did it, not to mention the hit to trade and energy prices. Now, over a dozen states want Biden to rethink his decision to cancel it. They say it could cause severe economic harm.
14 Republican attorneys general are threatening to take legal action against Biden if he doesn't change his mind about the Keystone pipeline. One of Biden's first moves as president was revoking the Keystone permit, saying it hurts America's efforts to combat climate change. The attorney general sent a letter to Biden. They argued he didn't explain how killing the Keystone pipeline project would protect Americans and the economy. They also said the move wouldn't actually fix any climate problems. Their conclusion? It's a symbolic act of virtue signaling to special interests and the international community. They say axing the pipeline will cost thousands of jobs and tens of millions in tax revenues. A State Department study found that construction of the Keystone project would contribute roughly $3.4 billion to America's gross domestic product. It also found that property taxes from the project would generate about $56 million in Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska. The pipeline would support over 40,000 jobs and create nearly 4,000 direct jobs during the 2-year construction phase. After entering service, it would provide dozens of permanent jobs. The Republicans are urging Biden to reconsider his decision.
The virus strain that overtook the United Kingdom is expected to do the same in the U.S. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the CDC's projection and updates on the virus crisis.
The British variant of the CCP virus is spreading in the U.S., so much that President Biden's team says it's expected to dominate other variants.
The models tell us that this very well might become dominant in the United States by the end of March. That being the case, we should not despair at that, because there are things that we can do to prevent that. It is not outside of our power to do that.
The CDC estimates that the UK variant already makes up between 1% and 4% of virus cases in the country. This variant is also said to be more contagious, but Dr. Fauci has questioned the UK's claim that it's deadlier, saying this needs to be confirmed. And although we have a new variant to worry about, national positivity and hospitalization rates are sliding down. So there's good news. It's been this way since mid-January, but deaths did peak last week. Over 5,000 in one day. The virus especially ravaged the lives of New Yorkers and Californians. For a long time, New York's death toll was the highest in the country. But now the Golden State is on its way to the top of the list, surpassing 44,000. That's CDC data, but numbers collected by other media companies already show California above New York's death toll of 44,800. California's death rate per capita is also higher. What makes this interesting is the state's lockdown orders, the second heaviest in the country. Multi-state ranked California's openness 11 places lower than New York's. Dr. Fauci said on Tuesday that mask mandates could be rolled back in late fall if enough people are vaccinated and the virus is no longer a threat. But for now, the CDC is doubling down on masks. Check out the commercial they made with Ad Council and Warner Media. They're using famous and infamous movie characters to encourage Americans to wear masks. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
After months of negotiations and a hostile standoff, Chicago's teachers union has struck a deal to return to class. The union president criticized the agreement, saying it's a disgrace school openings weren't delayed to ramp up vaccinations. But Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Chicago Public Schools CEO says this gives families the option to choose in-person learning. The first wave of staff and students in pre-K and special education are due back on Thursday, but families still have the option of remote learning. Students in K through 8 will return in segments between March 1st and March 8th for limited classroom instruction. High school students have no plans for in-person learning just yet. And the Biden administration just clarified its goal to reopen schools actually means for half of all schools to have some in-person teaching at least one day a week. A reporter asked why the bar wasn't set higher. Press Secretary Psaki said this is a bold and ambitious agenda they want to build off of. When asked why the administration didn't mention the one-day-a-week goal, Psaki said it was because she only asked about the goal to reopen most schools. And the vice president of a North Carolina Teachers Association says he's a leader of a Marxist group. This comes as many worry about the growing threat of socialism in schools. NTD's Christina Kim has more on the story.
The vice president of a nearly 45,000-member teachers association is found to have close ties to a revolutionary socialist movement. Brian Prophet is a self-proclaimed young leader of the organization Liberation Road, a socialist organization that is dedicated to fighting for a social system where social wealth is controlled by people instead of the elite. The group claims they don't idolize revolutionaries, but singles out communist dictators Marx, Lenin, and Mao as figures from whom they draw inspiration. They also claim the right and the Republican Party are the main enemy. Liberation Road wants to defeat these enemy forces one by one. Journalist Alex Newman says the ties aren't surprising.
And unfortunately, the communist side has really gotten control of the education system. And this gentleman in North Carolina, again, is just the tip of the iceberg. He represents a much broader problem that doesn't happen just in North Carolina. This is all over the nation.
Prophet co-authored a, quote, struggle paper for Liberation Road, which lays out how to spread socialism in the United States and beyond. It specifically targets people in unions and schools as a vehicle for revolution. The Herald Sun reports in 2017, Prophet and a group of teachers posed for a photo that reenacted toppling a Confederate statue. The post was published online as a weekly morale builder, but was later taken down at the request of school district officials. They note the photo was taken after school hours. Not all teachers follow this ideology.
And I can't tell you how many teachers and school board members I've talked to that want to oppose this, but they don't know how. They're faced with a system where all of the incentives are designed to get the teachers to go along.
Newman says because communism and socialism shun spirituality, the concept of God-given rights doesn't exist. This is critical in understanding why the ideology violates human rights and seeks total control.
These really evil ideas. They have to be dressed up in a way that is appealing to everyday normal people. And so that's why we hear this rhetoric about equality, about justice. But when you boil it down, it is plain and simple tyranny.
He urges parents to pay attention to their children's educators and school systems. Newman encourages parents to explore alternative forms of education like homeschooling or private schools. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Coming up, the New York Stock Exchange threatens to leave New York if a proposed tax comes in. The stockbroker's president saying that's just business. Violent crime without any apparent motive in New York City on the rise. What could be behind it? Find out more when we return.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever. Just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
What would Wall Street be without the New York Stock Exchange? Well, the exchange is threatening to leave if New York state legislators move forward with a new tax. NYSE President Stacey Cunningham wrote about the issue in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. She warned that the exchange may leave the state if lawmakers impose a transfer tax on stock sales. Cunningham wrote, quote, "History's lesson is clear. If you try to squeeze more revenue from financial firms, the business goes elsewhere." The NYSE and 25 others in the industry also sent a letter last week to Governor Cuomo arguing against the proposed tax. And different types of crime on the rise in New York City, even though the city's streets seem almost deserted. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story on one especially scary trend that's emerging.
On Tuesday morning, a woman was randomly pushed onto subway tracks in New York City. New York police is looking for the attacker. Subway shovings are on the rise in the city. So far, 5 people have been pushed onto subway tracks in 2021. If this trend continues, it could be more than double last year's numbers. Being shoved is a fear many New Yorkers have, and it's keeping some off the trains.
Have you ever worried about getting pushed in front of a subway train?
All the time.
It's one of my biggest fears, yes.
If I find myself standing near the edge, I think, what am I doing?
Violent crime is up across the board in New York City. Investigations are ongoing and shovers are on the loose. Luckily, all of the victims survived. So far, there remains no known motive behind the attacks, where people end up in these tracks. Dr. Carol Lieberman, a psychiatrist who was born and raised in New York City, says there are several factors contributing to the rise in random attacks.
I think coronavirus and the lockdowns do have something to do with the increase in violence in New York and all over.
According to her, it's a combination of things which cause a frustration in people.
It is the idea that we are being told what to do by mayors and governors, and these people have been shown to be hypocritical.
New York police said they'll make sure they have the proper balance of officers deployed at the right spots to keep New Yorkers safe. Reporting by Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
A California organization is criticizing President Biden's choice of an official who did not solve the state's Employment Development Department, or EDD, fraud problem. NTD's Ted Lin has the details.
Californians for Equal Rights are saying they oppose President Biden's nomination of Julie Su for the Deputy Secretary of Labor. Su is currently the Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. They argue that Su did not solve the massive EDD fraud and that the president's decision was a political move revolved around racial identity rather than individual abilities.
The Biden administration was actually pressured by a number of lobbyist groups to appoint Julie Su. It's more about the fact that she is an Asian woman and not about her qualification based on her past work experience.
The San Diego-based organization claims that Su did not thoroughly review each applicant's status for EDD eligibility.
Biden nominated her to be the Deputy Secretary of Labor, and she's supposed to manage taxpayers' money and help people on the federal level. Well, first, she hasn't helped the Californians who needed help. Secondly, taxpayers' money is being squandered under her watch. If you look at these two factors, she's not qualified.
On January 25th, Su formally acknowledged the fraud in a report from the EDD and that they are working with fraud prevention businesses and law enforcement agencies. The report stated that $114 billion in unemployment benefits was sent out to 19.5 million claims since last March, but 9.7% of the payments were confirmed to be fraudulent. A state audit also revealed that the EDD wrongly froze over 300,000 debit cards that were used to receive benefits and sent about $810 million in unemployment benefits to inmates across California. If the Senate confirms, she will be responsible for handling the daily affairs of 15,000 federal agency employees. We reached out to Julie Su's office for comment, but have not heard back as of press deadline. Reporting by Ted Lin, NTD News, California.
Aunt Jemima is America's beloved pancake and syrup brand, a staple on our breakfast tables and in our grocery stores. After going through a major makeover, it just revealed its new name and logo. NTD's Christina Kim shows us their changed look.
For more than 130 years, people have recognized this staple breakfast product by its rich red coloring and iconic logo of a smiling woman, Aunt Jemima. But starting in June, you won't be able to find her in stores anymore. That's because Aunt Jemima is rebranding. The new name, Pearl Milling Company. It's an homage to the mill that first produced Aunt Jemima's pancake mix in 1889. Prompted by the nationwide protests following the death of George Floyd, the parent companies of Aunt Jemima said the name didn't reflect their core values as its origins were based on a racial stereotype. But the family of Aunt Jemima Goodwill Ambassador Lillian Richard are not happy with the change. Lillian's second cousin Vera Harris told NBC 12, quote, "I wish we would take a breath and not just get rid of everything, because good or bad, it is our history. Removing that wipes away a part of me, a part of each of us. We are proud of our cousin." Anna Short Harrington was hired to be Aunt Jemima in the 1930s. Her great-grandson Larnell Evans told Patch this move is, quote, "to erase my great-grandmother's history," and says this is an injustice to him and his family. PepsiCo says the change aligns with their journey toward racial equality. Christina Kim, NTD News.
A man is recovering after being mauled by a bear while skiing. The U.S. Coast Guard rescued him from the Alaskan backcountry on Saturday. Video from the rescue shows search crew hoisting the man into their helicopter. They flew him to a nearby city where ER doctors treated his injuries. NBC's local Anchorage outlet says, according to the Coast Guard, the man's head and hands were wounded, but he was talking and responsive during the rescue.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her, all sort of handmade things. artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
마루 유치원 폐쇄 명령서입니다.
전 폐쇄 명령 받아들일 수 없습니다.
유치원 폐쇄 명령이라.
좀 들어간 건 어떻게 됐어? 도저히 방법이 없대?
정일도 사장님을 대신해서 제가 대신 말씀드리면 안 되겠습니까?
The Biden administration is drawing backlash for re-engaging with the United Nations Human Rights Council. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on that.
The Biden administration is facing criticism over its decisions to rejoin the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Trump administration withdrew from the council in 2018, citing that some of the worst human rights abusers or council members, like China, Cuba, and Venezuela. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken slammed the 2018 decision on Monday. He acknowledged the council is a flawed body in need of reform, but said Biden instructed the State Department to re-engage with the council. An observer in the council can submit draft resolutions, but does not have voting rights. Senator Marco Rubio from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee also criticized the decision. He said the council, quote, has become a place for despotic regimes to come together and receive international cover to continue to commit their horrific abuses. In January, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo designated the Chinese regime's persecution of the Uyghur minority in China's Xinjiang region as genocide. Senator Rick Scott also said the U.S. should, quote, reject engaging with an organization that turns a blind eye to genocide. Last week, 45 Republican House lawmakers sent a letter to Biden asking him not to rejoin the council. They reasoned it hasn't adopted any resolutions condemning countries like China and Cuba between 2006 and 2019. They say the Trump administration was right to withdraw because the U.S.'s participation has not led to any meaningful reforms. Now we turn to President Biden's pick for the country's leading intelligence agency, the CIA. The president has tapped William Burns to lead the agency, and media reports are bringing his ties to Communist China into the spotlight. These reports focus mainly on a trip to China and donations from a man that's part of Beijing's influence organs. Burns is the president of a foreign policy think tank called the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In 2019, Burns invited a group of congressional staffers on a trip to Beijing. There, the staffers met with a princeling, a foreign ministry official, and some academics. Princelings are the children of high-ranking Chinese Communist Party or CCP officials. Burns' organization paid for part of the trip expenses. The princeling in question is called Li Xiaoling. She is a daughter of a former regime leader. At the time, Li was the head of a group called CPA-FFC. The U.S. says the group is part of the United Front Work Department, Beijing's overseas propaganda arm. The United Front Work Department is a key organ under the CCP, and it has a big mission, coordinating thousands of groups that push the party's influence campaigns overseas. The department targets Western politicians and business leaders and works to sway them in Beijing's favor. Another important political body that pushes the United Front effort is CPPCC, and one of its members joined the Carnegie Endowment's Board of Trustees under William Burns' tenure. The member, Zhang Yichen, donated over $500,000 since he joined. Zhang is also the senior vice chair of a Beijing-based think tank. The leader of that think tank also works for the United Front Work Department. The Carnegie Endowment also received at least $200,000 in donations from the China-United States Exchange Foundation. The organization has also been accused of being a part of the United Front system. Burns is set to appear before a Senate confirmation hearing for his nomination. NTD reached out to him for comments but didn't get a response before airtime.
The Chinese regime is aiming to write the standards for the next generation of technologies. This with huge implications for global industries. NTD's Penny Zhou has more.
When the Chinese regime proposed its Made in China 2025 plan, it was accompanied by full-on state media propaganda campaigns. The ambitious plan aims to improve China's manufacturing power, but the U.S. believes the regime is doing so through massive state subsidies, unfair trade practices, and intellectual property theft. The Chinese proposal alarmed the West and triggered the wrath of former President Trump.
I said China 25 is very insulting because China 25 means in 2025 they're going to take over economically the world. I said that's not happening.
The plan was cited when Trump decided to impose massive tariffs on Chinese goods. So this time, the regime is keeping a much lower profile when it brought up the China Standards 2035 plan. But this new strategy is no less ambitious. Instead of playing the game by ignoring the international rules, now the Chinese regime wants to write the rules. The specifics of the plan are soon to be unveiled, but an official document published last year has made the goals clear. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, wants to set global standards for the next generation of technologies. That includes 5G internet, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. Industry standards make sure products manufactured across the world can work seamlessly together. That includes everything from the size of light bulbs to how 5G data is transferred. But why is it a problem that the CCP wants to set the rules? One example may highlight what the CCP has in mind for the order of global technology. Last March, the Financial Times reported that Chinese telecom giant Huawei proposed to the United Nations an alternative form of the Internet. Huawei engineers argued that the free and open space that's owned by everyone is outdated, and the world needs a new global network model. Under the new model, service providers would have complete oversight and control over every single device connected to the internet through their service. In China's case, the service providers are often state-owned companies that answer to the CCP. This top-down design of the internet will give governments much more control over the flow of information, and Huawei believes China should be the one building it for the world. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Russia have previously applauded the Huawei proposal. Can the CCP succeed at making these rules? In fact, the regime is already making progress in influencing the international organizations that set the rules. Huawei's new internet proposal, for instance, was submitted to an UN agency called International Telecommunication Union. The Chinese regime now participates in 40% of the agency's study groups that set standards for future networks and security. That's versus a mere 5% from the United States. Communist China also holds the 6th most secretaries in the world's largest standard-making body, the International Standard Organization, or ISO. According to a report by the Congressional U.S.-China Commission, the U.S. share has declined steadily since 2008, with China's share tripled during the same period. Organizations like the ISO and the International Electoral Technical Committees are full of Chinese nationals. Some even occupy key positions. The strategy is similar to how the CCP sends its officials to occupy other UN agencies to exert its influence in them. According to a Wall Street Journal report, in 2019, the Chinese regime tried to block the ISO from certifying a standard for typing Cantonese, the primary language used in Hong Kong. The language is a crucial part of Hong Kong's cultural identity, but Chinese delegates argued it's enough to have just one official language for all of China, and that's Mandarin Chinese. The U.S. has previously voiced concerns that the CCP might export authoritarian norms in setting standards for sensitive technologies like facial recognition in video surveillance. Beijing has already started promoting its standard to developing countries in Asia and Africa through its Belt and Road Initiative. The Wall Street Journal reported that Beijing would offer subsidies for the countries to use its standards and make it costly for them to switch to international standards. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Up next, a German city is testing a special kind of shelter for the homeless, wooden sleep pods. And technology that can recognize you even with your face mask on. Find out what it's being used for after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
A German city is currently testing a prototype sleep pod for the homeless. Makers call the wooden shelter a nest, but some say it looks more like a birdhouse or a coffin.
The mobile home is just big enough to fit one person. It has a solar panel on its roof to power lights and a myriad of technical gadgets. The so-called Ohm Nest was designed and built by 6 local companies for people who, quote, for different reasons cannot sleep in homeless shelters. The sleep pod unlocks automatically in the evening and during sub-zero temperatures, offering protection against the cold. That's according to Norman Kurak, who works for Caritas charity.
The nest unlocks itself automatically in the evening, which means that someone who needs a place to sleep can simply open the door and find a safe place overnight.
The sleep pod contains detectors to monitor motion as well as the temperature and humidity inside. It's also possible to determine whether it's occupied via an smart app. Kurak checks up on the sleep pod every morning.
Those who have used it are very happy because they realize that it offers protection from the cold as well as from attacks. Sometimes people's fear of being attacked is of much greater concern.
It's still unclear if these sleep pods will go into series production. Their website states it will depend on the number of orders and other factors. Interested parties are reminded to consider follow-up costs, such as for social workers, cleaning, and maintenance.
Ride-hailing company Lyft is showing signs of recovery. It beat some Wall Street expectations but fell short in some places. NTD's Patrick Hayden has a look at its fourth quarter results.
Lyft says its fourth quarter earnings are better than expected. Here are the key numbers. Revenue beat expectations by $7 million. Loss per share beat expectations by 14 cents. And revenue per active rider beat expectations by $3.20. Signs of the business's recovery saw its stock rise more than 10%. CFO Brian Roberts said it could become profitable for the first time by the fourth quarter or maybe even the third. For the full year, its revenue was $2.4 billion. That's down from $3.6 billion in 2019. Its fourth quarter numbers for active riders was also disappointing. It hardly grew from the previous quarter. The company said demand was negatively impacted by a surge in CCP virus cases. Unlike its main competitor Uber, Lyft hasn't developed a food delivery service to adapt to the lockdown environment. And Lyft is keeping its investments in driverless cars, something Uber has sold out of. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Prices at the pump are going up. AAA says the average cost for a gallon is $2.46. That's a 4-cent increase from last week, and it's up 16 cents from the last month. That pushed average prices higher than this same time last year across 2/3 of the country. The upward trend looks like it'll continue this month. The largest rise in weekly gas prices were found in Florida, Michigan, and West Virginia. And a new facial recognition system from Japan can recognize you even with your mask on. The company says it has an accuracy rate of over 99.9%.
Japan's NEC Corporation has launched a facial recognition system that identifies people even when they're wearing a mask. It can do this in less than a second.
Our system measures the parts that are not covered with a mask, such as the corners of the eyes and wrinkles around it. We specifically focus on such parts and verify faces.
The company claims an accuracy rate of over 99.9%. NEC was already working on a system to help people with allergies. In Japan, it's very common for people with allergies to wear facial masks.
There have been requests for inventing a system that could verify people even when they were wearing masks. That's how we started making the system. The outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic urged us to speed up our production process.
The technology is mostly used for security, but it can also make things more convenient. NEC is using it at its Tokyo headquarters. Employees can buy products at an unmanned convenience store just by passing the entrance gates. The new system is on sale in Japan and overseas. German airline Lufthansa and Swiss International Airline have already bought the system.
Coming up, the BBC is working with Chinese tech giant Tencent on a number of flagship programs. The Chinese company allegedly has links to the communist regime's intelligence agency. And Europe's oldest person, 117-year-old French nun Sister Andre, has survived the CCP virus. More on her story after the break.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Charities are calling for care home visits to resume by March. NTD's sister media, the Epoch Times, spoke to the co-founder of a dementia support group that's calling for urgent action. NTD's Eddie Aitken brings us more.
Charity Age UK on Tuesday appealed for urgent and united action to restart care home visits by March. Age UK said in a joint statement, "Getting back to a position where everyone can receive meaningful indoor visits is a matter of safety, common decency and fundamental human rights." Co-founder of Jones Campaign, Julia Jones, a group which advocates for visiting rights for people in care settings, also signed the statement.
All of us are united on this, then nobody's being irresponsible or flippant. We're all looking from our different perspectives to what is best for the people who are living in the care homes.
Jones said that millions of elderly and vulnerable people are now vaccinated against COVID-19, with almost all care home residents being offered a vaccine.
What is the point of this vaccination if it makes no difference to people who've been parted from one another for a year?
She said that she often witnessed the anguish experienced by people separated by the visiting ban, many for almost a year. But Jones has also been struck profoundly by the depth of attachment that some people feel.
But really, I have been deeply moved by the devotion that some people have in the past shown to their mother, their husband, their father, their sister,
The most important thing for Jones is to have a specific date for care home visits to resume. The Care Minister has said visiting should start as soon as it's safe. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Chinese tech giant Tencent has a series of deals with the BBC to co-produce some of the broadcaster's flagship shows. The Chinese company also allegedly has links to the communist regime's intelligence agency.
According to the Daily Telegraph newspaper, Tencent worked with the BBC on its flagship programmes, including co-producing Sir David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2. The partnership began in 2016, with BBC's current Director General Tim Davie being a key figure in signing a deal with Tencent's movie arm. Tencent allegedly received money from the Chinese regime's intelligence agency, and its app WeChat is accused of censoring politically sensitive content.
Europe's oldest person, French nun Sister Andre, has survived the CCP virus. She will celebrate her 117th birthday this week. NTD's Joanna Conway brings us the story.
Sister Andre tested positive in her retirement home in Toulon, southern France, last month. She displayed no symptoms but was isolated from other residents. When she was asked whether she felt scared at some point, she replied,
No. No, I wasn't scared because I wasn't scared of dying.
David Tavella, communications director for the care home, said that she's doing well. He says although Sister Andre is blind, she's very spirited and celebrates her 117th birthday this week. Tavella says her birthday brings delight to other residents there as well as staff.
It will allow us to bring everyone together once again, and we owe this to our eldest resident. It's very touching and relieving for the residents, for the families and for the care workers.
Sister Andre was born on February the 11th, 1904, and is the world's second oldest living person. The oldest person is Japan's Kane Tanaka, who turned 118 on January the 2nd. Joanna Conway, NTD News.
Coming up, footage of a lion that strayed from a wildlife sanctuary and into a hotel compound in India. And a handy dad builds a giant sledding track for his kids in northern Latvia. It's taken him 6 years to complete it. That and more after the break.
Why are millions of Americans moving their money into gold and silver? It's simple. The world has never been more unpredictable. The biggest economic crisis we've faced since 2008, and a government that's about to print trillions and trillions of dollars. That's why so many Americans are turning to gold and silver to protect their nest egg. American Hartford Gold is a trusted name to help families to safeguard their wealth. With an A+ rating from the BBB and 5-star ratings on the biggest review websites like Trustpilot and Google, American Hartford Gold can help you convert any qualifying IRA or 401k into precious metals. Or they'll help you to easily purchase physical gold and silver and deliver straight to your doorstep. Learn how you can protect your wealth with gold and silver today. Get this free 2021 information guide. Call 866-893-1493 or text TV to 65532.
A lion strayed into a hotel compound in a city in India and was seen strolling on its premises. Take a look. The hotel CCTV showed the lion jumping over the entry gate and roaming around in its premises. Cases of lions straying into human settlements are common in that area, which is close to a wildlife sanctuary known as the last abode of Asiatic lions. There are about 674 lions nearby, according to the census in 2020. Asiatic lions are endangered animals. They're different from African lions, with a characteristic skin fold on their bellies and thinner manes. And sliding down a frozen slope, it's a winter game loved by children, especially when the track and sled are built by Daddy. 2 children in Latvia are especially lucky. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more.
Alvis Berzins, a father of 2, uses his DIY skills to the hilt. He built a huge sliding track in his backyard in northern Latvia. Berzins said he started building the track 6 years ago to provide an outdoor activity for his children.
I built the bobsleigh track for the kids, so they've got something to do in the winter and they don't sit in the house all the time in front of the TV and computer.
Berzins, who works as a sheep shearer, had no prior experience with bobsleigh driving before he put together the first meters of his track.
I used some old disassembled wardrobes I didn't want to burn. I spent maybe 50 euros for screws, but that's all. The rest is my initiative and joy of working.
Berzin started to build the track when his son was only 1 year old. Now he is 7. He and his 4-year-old sister take turns sliding down the track.
The sleds are the Java motorcycles sidecars, made in Czechoslovakia. I made 2. While one is going down, the other one can be pulled up.
The track is built along Berzin's apple orchard. One ride lasts almost a minute, with the bobsleigh going up to 30 kilometers per hour along the 170-meter-long track. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
It's a rare spectacle. A wave of snow and freezing temperatures set a unique scene at the Mont Saint-Michel, the famous medieval monastery in Normandy. An immaculate white coat surrounded the tidal islet and its vast sandbanks. Walkers and photographers flocked to the gravity-defying attraction off France's northwest coast despite icy winds. Unfortunately for visitors, Mont Saint-Michel's restaurants are closed due to pandemic restrictions. A French forecaster issued a warning for snow and icy roads in a large part of the north of France this week. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.